My grandmother, Wanda Gray, married my grandfather, Gerald Sharp, in August of 1955. You can imagine that in 60 years of being married, my grandma and papa would have a number of stories. The main events my grandmother described all occurred in the first few years of their marriage. Grandma and papa were married in August and bought a small 2-bedroom house. My papa worked as a mail clerk, but his company soon said he needed more experience and that he would need to work on the oil fields. After only being married a couple of months, Papa would move to New Mexico, 400 miles from home. They told him if he went down for 1 month on his own, they would pay for the move when Grandma joined him. Grandma described this as quite the experience because she had to ride a bus, which she had never done before, to go and visit him on a weekend, and then to later go and find them a home. Grandma ended up finding a tiny 1-bedroom cottage with no garage, the only place available to rent in Eunice, New Mexico. Grandma laughed as she described how when the truck came to bring all of their things from their house in Fort Worth, they realized none of it would fit. They had to send back almost all of their belongings to her mother's house. Wanda and Gerald were in New Mexico for about a year or so before the company had them move to Ballinger, Texas. This is where they had their firstborn, Daryl, my uncle. Grandma described this whole transition as the time when they really had to figure out how to live on their own without parents nearby. This all led them to move to Morton, Texas, where they lived for 7 years. Grandma described Morton fondly. Morton is where she had her other 3 kids, including my father, and where she formed great relationships with people from the church they attended. The only people Grandma really wanted to leave her kids with were a family from their church. The man of the family was an elder at the church, and they had older girls that liked to play with the babies, my dad and my uncle. When the elder died after fighting cancer, Grandma and Papa stepped in to take care of his family. Grandma warmly reminisced times that my papa would act as a fill-in daddy to those girls. These sweet friends were the reason my grandma described their next move as their biggest move. Because Papa wasn't making enough money, they moved to a small town in the country south of Lubbock in 1968. Grandma and Papa were only there from April until October, when Grandma's daddy passed away. They went to Fort Worth and decided to bring her mother back to Loop with them. When they all got back home, Papa's company told him he didn't have a job anymore. The whole family then was forced to pack everything up and head back to live at her mother's house in Fort Worth. Papa ended up getting a job in Grand Prairie, while Grandma and the kids went back and forth from her mother's house to Papa's daddy's house while they tried to figure out where to live. They finally got their trailer set up in Bedford, Texas in December. Around that time, Bedford started getting bigger and bigger until the city wouldn't let them stay in their trailer anymore. Grandma and Papa bought a nice house in 1969 and have lived there ever since. This is the house that I, my dad, aunt and uncles, brothers, and many cousins have made so many fond memories in. There were a lot of events that all clearly built on each other and helped shape my grandmother and her family. The 2 I would say that has helped shape me the most would be when she moved 400 miles to a small house in their first year of marriage, and then later moving again to Bedford, Texas, when her father passed away. Not only is that the house in Bedford is special to me because I have a lot of great memories there, but if they didn't stay in Bedford, I probably wouldn't call Bedford home. My dad grew up in Bedford, and my family has been in that area my whole life. I wouldn't have had a lot of life experiences if it weren't for my grandma moving to Bedford in 1969. The moving around shaped my life, not so much because of the moving itself, but the way my grandmother talks about that time in her life. It really shapes what I believe about a sacrificial marriage and life. Grandma and Papa were always in it together. Grandma never mentioned not wanting to move far away from her family or home. She always just said, "Okay," and they went. She never said she wanted to keep her quality job or to do her own thing. She was always there for Papa and went where he went. They had to get rid of all of their things when they moved to New Mexico, and they just learned to live simpler and love deeper. These events also show me what being faithful and glorifying the Lord looks like. Grandma noted several times how good the Lord was to them. She talked about how blessed she was to have her children in a hospital despite living in a small town, and how God was watching over her and her children. The story of my Papa being a fill-in daddy to those girls is a perfect picture of how I see my Grandma and Papa today. They are gentle, kind, and loving servants. I admire greatly the way they love the Lord and the way they love others. They put everybody first and themselves last. They live a simple life and are only ever prideful of their family. They give credit to the Father in all circumstances. I know how to pray, I know how to love, and I want to be a godly wife and mother someday because of the wonderful example my Grandma and Papa continually show me and everyone around them.